pleased to have Dr. Kathleen Irwin lead us in a series of team-based learning PDSs this semester. So thank you very much. Join me in welcoming Dr. Irwin.
Thank you. Oh, great. So I'll get started. I'm sure we'll have some more folks come in. They won't miss much. I'll talk about myself, and you know that's really kind of dull. But so I am Kathleen Irwin. I teach in the undergraduate health administration program here at Auburn. We're located in the Department of Political Science. Only place in the country we're located that way. So I teach all undergraduates. I've taught some master's level courses, but I'm mainly undergraduate. I teach health insurance and reimbursement. I teach health information technology. I teach a developing healthcare organizations management course, quality management, electronic health records, so kind of a variety across the program that I've been able to teach. The intro course. I discovered active learning at this campus. So I've been here 5 years. I spent 25 years working in the field before I went back and got my degree and decided to work and as a faculty member, which is a great life. I heard about this new space we were going to have over in Haley Center called at that time, the incubator classroom. It's now known as EASEL. And I'm an early adopter. If you know anything about the diffusion of innovation and the adoption curve, I'm an early adopter. So I said, I want to do that. I hate these classrooms with a little desk. You feel like you're in the first grade. You know, they're very uncomfortable. Students feel like they're in the first grade. They act like they're in the first grade. So I'm all in. So through a series of workshops that those of us that got on board to start with, we were taught several different active learning techniques. And so we were introduced to this team-based learning methodology, and it just resonated with me. And I was about to start a seminar in quality management. It was a brand new prep. And I said, okay, I'm going all in. That's what I'm going to teach in there. I'm just going to jump in. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure it out. And I did learn on the fly. So I was kind of self-taught. I have since then adopted another course, gone back and refurbished a course, and I've taught using the method a couple of years now. I've been able to attend the TBL conference this past year thanks to the Big Yo Center and the Breeding Grant program. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm still learning. I mean, it's a constant learning curve. So what I'm going to do today is we've got an hour, we've got 55 minutes. This is going to be a very quick primer or primer. You can pronounce it either way, depending on, I had that argument with someone about 30 years ago. Just to cover the basic structure of how do you put together a TBL course. And just as Diane mentioned earlier, there is a series. We're going to do 3 this fall. So the seminars that follow this will delve deeply into a couple of really important aspects. So today I'm going to demo a couple of things with you, but I can't, if we had like half a day, we would really roll up our sleeves and you would really work hard. But you're going to do a little bit of work. So does this look familiar to you? Which side is your classroom on? Okay. So this old saying is, do you want to be the sage on the stage as I am right now? And we all like to do that. It's fun. There's something in us that we enjoy getting up in front of, speaking in front of people. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But, they tune out. They have the attention span of a flea, of a tweet. There's some. I'm sure if you've been learning in your professional development seminars or in your teaching, reading about teaching or taking seminars, probably a 15-minute time span is about all you can hold their attention before you need to do something with them. But what I have tried to do is move from being the expert up front to being the guide on the side. Because who learns? They learn. Sometimes they don't even realize how they learn. They think that they learn by you standing in front of them and telling them things. And they go off and memorize it. But just a little background. So if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy and the way we learn, Sharon Roberts over in COSAM made this. I stole this from her. She and I were presenting somewhere, and she mentioned, where do we need the expert? She said, I get all these students in my class in biology, and I'm the expert, and I spend all this time down here helping them remember and understand things. And then I send them home to their dorm rooms and apartments to get in their pajamas and do the high-level learning. Right? Where do we need the expert? So what TBL and a lot of active learning techniques looks at, students can do this on their own. And sometimes you have to tell them they can do this on. They have to kind of discover they really do this on their own. Where is our time best spent? Our time is best spent at that higher level of applying, analyzing, really, not just, what are the facts. They can get the facts on their own. So that's really the kind of the premise behind TBL. Boom. Now it's your turn. We're going to do something. Let's see, we've got, who all wants to participate in this? Diana, are you going to participate or are you going to sit back? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we've 9. So we'll do 2 teams. And
unless it makes a team screwy, in which case I'll watch.
well, we could do 3 teams of 3. I like to do teams of 5 to 7, but in this instance, we'll do teams of 3. So I am going to ask a series of questions. And the first question that applies to you, I want you to come and stand here. And we're going to make a line going that way. Now, some of these questions may all apply to you, but just the first one that applies to you, come and stand. All right. Who did the pre-reading for this session? Who has attended a TBL session, used TBL, or been in a course taught using TBL? Who has never heard of TBL before signing up for this session? Who has 3+ years of teaching experience? All right. So that's taking care of everybody. Super. Now, the old-fashioned way, we're going to count off 1 to 3.
1, 2,
3, 1,
2, 3,
1,
2, 3.
Great. Okay. 1s, gather up here. I'd like you to be able to see each other. Let's put the 2s here, and let's put the 3s kind of back in that corner. You are now a team. Great. Introduce yourselves and name your team. All right. Does everybody have a name? Everybody have a name. All right. Team 1. I would like one of you to stand up, introduce your team members, and tell us what your team name is.
All right, we are Team Rockstar. I'm Courtney, I'm from BCom. This is Miss Mary Peterson, and she's from nursing. And this is Kathleen, and you're gonna have to say it yourself.
Human Development and Family Studies. HDFS.
All right. Team 2.
Like you're gonna be our spokesperson.
All right, so our team name is Apple Fanatics. And
Apple Fanatics.
I'm Blake, and this is Sarah. You should.
There's someone on the table if you want to meet them.
All right. And where are y'all from? What's your discipline?
Education, nursing, and fisheries.
Awesome. Great. Team number 3.
For Team 3, I'm Josh Hollingsworth from BCom. This is Diane, head of the PDS Center. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. And Sam is a teaching fellow, correct?
Postdoc in the Big Year Center.
Postdoc in the Big
But tell them our name. That's the best part.
Oh yeah, Team Crush It. Sorry.
Yeah, we already knew your name. It rang out across the room. Anyway, great. Okay, so this is one of the big pieces of TBL. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. But what I do, well, I'll talk about that in a moment. So you now have a team, you have a name, you've met each other. This is your team for the rest of the semester. So what is team-based learning? So it's collaborative learning. It really builds that team environment where it's an active, engaged group. They're gathering information on the outside and they're applying it in the classroom, and you are working with them as a guide. Yes, ma'am.
I already have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you found, what's the pros and cons in letting the students choose their own teams versus assigning them teams?
Great question. And I'm going to address that in just a moment.
Okay.
But that's very important. So here are the key components to TBL. Number 1, a very good orientation to TBL. Number 2, strategically formed permanent teams. Talk about that in a moment. There's a readiness assurance process. That's where you make sure that they have gotten the content kind of basically down and they're ready to apply it. And then a series of in-class team application exercises. And then finally, the fifth component of it is a strong peer evaluation component. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let me talk about the orientation. I can't even stress how important it is that you spend time thinking about taking the entire first class session to orient your students to team-based learning. And there are a number of tools and tricks and tips that I can give you that are available to you. I'm going to give you information at the end of the session about a great resource for you to do that. I spend time explaining what it's going to be, how the course is going to be structured, kind of your typical things that you do. But I also have used something now where I start asking them a series of questions, almost like a survey, so that they can come to the conclusion that, hey, I can get the information on my own, and I want to spend time in the classroom applying. So you're really asking them, what are you looking for out of this class? What are you looking for out of your education? I mean, this is something I didn't make up. It's a tool that I got from the Team-Based Learning Collaborative. But I've been using, and there are lots of different ways to do this, but it is extremely important because for a lot of these folks, this is totally different. And it requires work on their part. And I don't know about your students. I've got some that are hard workers, and I got some that, not so hard, right? So I think it's good to help them come to the conclusion. You really talk about the objectives that you're going to do. And what's important in team-based learning is it's not just about, you really think about your learning objectives in a different way when you plan your course. You stop thinking about what do I want my students to know when they leave here. You think about what do I want my students to be able to do when they leave here. Not just memorizing and capturing the knowledge, which they will, but what do you want them to be able to do? And that helps you design the course. What I often do at this point too is I will use the syllabus and I'll do a quick demonstration of the readiness assurance process, which I'm going to do with you in just a moment, to let them have an understanding of what's going to happen for them. So one of the first things you do is that you do form teams. The team-based learning methodology, which, by the way, was kind of started by Larry Michelson, who's a management professor at Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma. He used it in a very large classroom. So this methodology has been used across disciplines. It's been used in small courses. It's been used in very large lecture courses. So it's very adaptable to the situation that you're in. But one thing that all the TBL folks that are really experts at it, way beyond my years, I've said, do not allow students to form their own teams.
Oh, no, I just did.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. You didn't know. You will next time. Because what are they going to do? They're going to get with their sorority sister or their boyfriend, or you want an equal distribution of assets across the room. So if you saw what I did, I asked a series of questions starting at your level of expertise and actually your level of knowledge of what you're supposed to read before you walked in today, because we're going to have a test on that, down to the least experience. And that's what I do in my classroom. I start with my students. I use this in my health information technology class right now. I ask my students who has completed their internship, because they're required to do a full semester internship, 30 hours a week. So they've actually been out there and worked, because I have very traditional students. Very few of them have worked. Then I ask the students who have completed their capstone or in the process of doing their capstone, which is their final, obviously you know what a capstone project is. And I work my way down. So I'm trying to get an equal distribution across my teams of levels of experience. I typically don't, once I have them in a group, I don't have to change them. I might, if I see that I think the diversity is not very well represented, I might switch. Like I may have a lot of females and very few men. And I might end up with a lot of the men in one group and in a lot of female groups. I'll take the men and move them around. So I might tweak it a little bit, but most times it kind of works out. There are lots of ways you can do this. Lots of ways. I have small classes, so that's pretty easy for me. Sometimes in the large classes, they will survey their students, and then based on the survey, try to do some groupings. There's also a tool called from CatMe. Is anyone familiar with CatMe? If you are, raise your hand. CatMe is an interesting tool. You might want to check that out. That's another way that you can load certain information into it and you can create teams. So I've seen that demoed before. I haven't used it myself yet, but I have talked with a number of people who've been very pleased with CatMe. Optimum team size, according to the team-based learning folks, 5 to 7. I typically am in the 4 to 6 range. I think you have to get a small enough group. The important thing is for them to stay together the entire semester, because it's any kind of team development, right? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a such thing as too many teams?
No. If when you look at Larry Michelson, who's used it in a class of 300, no. You've got to manage it. Hopefully you've got some help. If you've got 300 people, you've got maybe a GTA or 2 running around. Okay, we'll talk. We'll talk later. We'll talk later. No, it's manageable. They manage themselves. You really will find that you feel like you're not doing anything because you're sitting there while they're working. You're going. It's kind of fun, actually. So, but you have the whole thing of forming and norming and storming. It takes them a while to get to know one another, and. But the nice thing about it is that even those students that will not speak out in a large group, they become comfortable. And they will work within their smaller groups. And it does help those students who are reticent to raise their hand or to speak out in a larger situation. And I've watched this happen. I can think of a student right now that I have who's an excellent student. Excellent, but she never wants to speak. I always have to call on her. She's never going to raise her hand. But I've watched her in a small group, and she's just right in there, working with that group. Okay. I do sometimes team building. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today because the next seminar is going to really focus on building your teams and how do you get student buy-in. But I will do some things. I'm telling you, I take the entire first class period and maybe even to the second class period of building comfort among those teams. I will do a simple personality test for them to understand themselves. What are some of my strengths and weaknesses? What might be a pro for me in this group? And what might be something that I need to watch? I might need to overcome. Am I a dominant personality type? That sort of thing. So just gets them thinking about learning about the people they're working with. What are their strengths and weaknesses? I don't go into a huge depth with this, but I just and they love this. Oh, they love it. They love to learn about themselves, and because we're all self-centered, right? But to understand, I may be the smartest person in the room, and that is not always the best thing, right? So, and this also kind of helps later in the semester when I start doing team evaluations, or they start doing their peer evaluations. I have them also create a team charter. That what they expect from one of each other. Have you ever been to a meeting where before the meeting started, you say, let's set some ground rules for the meeting? That's kind of that's something I use in strategic planning. I do some strategic planning facilitation. And you come to a consensus as a group of these are things that we're going to abide by. And I have them fill this out, they sign it, and I eventually create a folder for them. And I use this folder every time I have them take a test, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, where maybe I've got their team names out here, or I may have their team names in here, but I staple that charter in there. So every time they open it up, it's like, hey, remember what you said y'all were going to do? You were going to show up for meetings. You were going to read ahead of time. The things that they promised one another. Part of this is learning to be an adult. All right. Any questions so far? Great. Okay. Let's talk about the Readiness Assurance process. So in TBL, there are 3 components to your grade. You have individual performance, you have a team performance, and you have something called team maintenance. So the Readiness Assurance process is a great demonstration to you right now of what individual versus team performance is. So we have something that we call the RATs. It's a readiness assessment test. So we like to call them RATs. We have the IRAT, which is the individual RAT, and we have the GRAT. This is what you have them do just to assess their basic comprehension of the content. So I have now asked you to read something before you came to class. Usually I do this at the beginning of a module. I don't do this every class. So this is like once every 3-4 weeks. I've asked you to read something. I'm now going to test you to see if you basically comprehended some of the key points. And I heard someone describe it as this is a table of contents level test, not an index level test, if you think about the book. You will each take this individually, and then you will put away your answer sheet. But you can keep the test, so you can write on the test. You still have your test copy. And once everyone has completed their individual test, then you are going to work together as a group to take this test. And the fun thing is, I'm going to give you a scratch-off card. You won't win any money, but this is the tool that I like to use. This is a great little scratch-off tool. If you answer the question correctly and scratch off, there's a little star. And it's like, wow, yay, star, first try. If it's not there, well, I'm going to give you 2 more tries to find it. So, but the nice thing is that the students have to speak to one another. You're going to have to come to a consensus and say, okay, I think it's A. If it's A, you're going to be so excited. If it's not, you're going to look at each other and go, whoa, why isn't it A? This process is so much fun because to hear the students discussing and debating the material, and you get a sense of what they know. And by the end of it, you realize what they don't know. So you can spend your time, you don't have to waste your time talking about stuff they've already got. But you can then focus, if you need to do a little mini lecture, you can key in on those things that they're not getting yet.
Where'd you get the scratch cards?
They are from a company called Epstein. I'm going to give you one of these. I just order them off the internet. The nice things about these cards, they come in different iterations. So the one I'm going to give you to take the test on, I started off with these with a 5. I don't know why I do that. I never do 5 answers. I always do 4. But you can get, this is 10 questions. I've got some with 25. You can have 4. You can have 5. They typically send them to you in like a batch of 4 different ones, and they are coded. They're coded at the bottom. I know what this is. I have a sheet that tells me what the answers are, right? So I just tear that little slip off when I give it to the students. They don't know, so that way they don't learn the pattern. And another cool thing about the stars, they don't always just put the star in the middle. They may put it on one side or the other side of that block, so they can't just try to do the corner thinking the star is going to be right there. So it's kind of, they've been pretty clever about it. There are also some ways to do this online. I haven't used any of the online tools, but I see a lot of chatter in the listserv from TBL about those. All right. So, Epstein Educational.
Are they very expensive?
They're not too bad. I want to say, $100 or something. I got like a couple hundred of them.
Oh.
They're not bad at all.
Wait, how many did you get?
I don't remember, honestly. They come in batches of like 100 or 250 or things like that.
If you're interested in testing it, the Video Center has some forms that they can provide for you if you want to email me with that.
Okay.
All right, so I've actually, usually I have them bring their own Scantron for the first part of the test. I've just made a simple, but you could make something simple. I mean, you literally could sit there and grade the individual part of the test while they're taking the group part. But here, we'll start with this. This is individual, this is your own work. Do not look on to your neighbor. This is not the group portion of the test.
Is it possible to do this with the clickers as well, or?
Yeah, I'm sure you could, but how do you know if they get it the first try, the second try, the third try? Because if they can start seeing the voting and you're telling them what they're getting. But you could. I'm sure you could do that. I've seen some people talk about that on listserv, but they get such a kick out of scratching off these cards. It really, okay, y'all can go ahead and get your little.
We all want our tests.
your test. I know you're all star students, otherwise you would not be here. There are 5 questions. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to take this test. So when you're finished, if you'll just pull those individual score sheets together, maybe put them over here together upside down. So before I give you your card for your GRAT, so this is what I have learned to do this, is to give each team a folder. If they open up the folder, this is taped inside. They can't take it off until they're ready to use it. They have their test. Like I said, I have them use a Scantron. Typically, I usually have probably 20 questions, and they have to place their Scantrons back in this, close the folder, and then they cannot remove the scratch off until I tell them that they can. And the last time I went to a big TBL 101 seminar not long ago, and I had a woman from Australia. They got like a $20,000 or $30,000 grant to like prepare their materials for a year, and she was in nursing. She also talked about, and I've learned to do this too, is to time it, because you have some that'll fly through it, and you have those test takers that are always very long. So you may have to just think about, are you going to give them a minute and a half per question? Are you going to wait until you see you may have 2 or 3 left, and then say, okay, you've got 2 minutes, but you definitely need to probably push them along, because I always have some that are just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. If I just let the others do their usual, I'm going to sit here and look over these questions 30 times before so it is good to move them along. All right, so once y'all have finished these, now you would take out your if-at, which is instant feedback, immediate feedback test. And I would have you fill out the top, just probably the name of your group. And you will need like a dime or a penny. If anybody needs any change, I have some. That's the best way to scratch off, I would say. And don't be quick on the trigger. You know, you want to make sure that you feel like you are comfortable. And penny for your thoughts. All right. Do y'all need some change down here? Do you need
That was a hard one.
Are you?
We're good.
Oh, no, we're
You good? All right. Are y'all good? Okay.
Is it, can we go now?
Y'all go for it.
All right, so discussing session.
First?
I say,
Yeah.
I think I got this one. Oh, yes.
I was like, oh,
All right.
Is that our final answer?
Is that it? All right.
I have a hard time.
Right.
It's a team effort. All right.
Let's go.
All right. Are you finished? Well, go up there and put how many points out of 20 you got. And if you missed one, which number you missed. You get 4 points for your first try, 2 points for your second try, 1 point for your third try.
Excuse me. They put it on the high side.
Yeah, do 20 out of 20.
Yeah. All right. Last year.
Blue marker, the first question. It's an X.
So, I'm just going to be this way.
Oh no! We have competition. It's gonna be a TBL throwdown.
We're gonna duke it out.
That's right. How many points we get?
Well, we got it.
Oh man!
You're all stars.
Three ways, yeah, well.
Yeah.
We are. I'm
Yeah,
scared
but
of the
we're
team that
team
says
crush
crush it.
Excellent. Interesting thing, when we did this as a large group, we had probably, I don't know, 12 teams of 5 or 6. We missed one. So we got 18 out of 20. So one of the things that I saw demonstrated there that I really enjoyed that I want to do now is, okay, so we had to walk up there, put our score, and we also, if we missed one, we put which number we missed. That way, as a teacher, I am quickly seeing, even as the group, and I would have walked around and listened to you discuss this, you know, so I already knew where you might have been struggling. And sometimes it would just get cracked up. It really is so enjoyable because you saw we all were laughing and talking and yelling.
So you have your student groups running on the board like this?
I'm going to. That's what I saw demoed, which that helped, especially for them to go up and let me know what number they missed.
Right. And do you just take what they write up there as their grade, or do you
No, they turn in the materials. Now, and so at this point, you know, you work hard to do your tests, right? I don't allow my tests to ever go back to the students. There are not copies of my tests floating around. We also don't want them to take pictures of them, right? We don't want them to take pictures of them. So they put all their materials back in here. They turn this into me. One of my colleagues said that they have a policy that if there is one test copy missing, and they have to put their names on their test, so you know, then their group will lose their points. So there are ways to build in the kind of mechanisms for quality assurance to make sure that they are not taking your tests away, or you know. But another thing I've seen recently on the listserv, just this week, there was a phenomenon of someone going, "Hey, I think people are taking pictures." So you know, you've got to think about that. That no, all their stuff has got to be put away. There can be no texting while you're waiting to take the group test, that sort of thing, because you do not want to give them the opportunity to copy your material. But then once they turn everything in.
So individual scores get recorded and then the team scores get
Yes,
recorded.
those are 2 scores. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how those count in this next section. Okay, so the basic course structure is that you build your course into modules. 1 to 3 chapters of material, you know, each module might last 2 to 4 weeks. You think about you got a 16-week, you know, semester roughly, or if you want to count it as a 15-week semester, because if you're like me, there's always at least 1 week that's lost. They do assigned readings or modules. Some folks like to give, say if you've got 3 chapters, but you may give them a reading guide. There are a lot of different ways you may want to approach how they do the readings, or if you have journal articles or whatever, but you may want to give them some kind of reading guide, plus your learning objectives. This is where they really help to show what is the most important things that I want you to pick up on your reading. They come in, we do the readiness assurance process. I realize that, hey, we're ready to go. I don't need to spend any time clarifying any of the subject matter. So we are ready to move on to the in-class application process. So we have individual preparation, right? We have teams discuss, and then we're able to facilitate a class discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about how some of that happens. This might be basically an activity sequence. This, once again, a lot of this material I've borrowed from TeamBased Learning Collaborative. I'm going to show y'all, but this can kind of give you an idea in terms of time. I teach classes 2 days a week for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And so the day that I give a RAT test, it takes the entire time. It really does. I might have a little time at the end to give instructions about what they're supposed to do to prepare for the next class. One of the, yes?
You said you do like 20 questions on your RAT. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. Because I typically do have about 3 chapters of material. And I tried 25, and I'll go back to 20. Then I have to think about how I'm going to score it. If you saw over here, I usually write down, okay, your first try is 4 points, your second try is, sometimes I have it as a 5, 3, and 1, because I try to make everything be 100, you know, however you want to work your points out. But basically, it's like you get half credit and then half credit. Okay. We just did this. Okay, so one thing we didn't talk about would be, you know, sometimes test questions may not be good questions. So there's actually a way to put a written appeals process into the session. So it doesn't happen that often. But what they have to do is, in that class that day, at the end of the RAT, they have to sit down together as a group, and they have a form, and they have to justify and tell you what's wrong with the question. Maybe it was worded, maybe it contradicts what they read, and they can go and find if they can prove that to you. Or maybe it's worded in a way that was very ambiguous, and they can actually suggest another way it might have been worded, and they have to submit that form to you that day before they leave. You don't give them like a couple of days to research this, right? So, and I have occasionally had this happen. It doesn't happen that often. You may have higher level students, they might do a little bit more of it, but you know, quite frankly, you know, sometimes we don't do that good a job doing multiple choice questions. You can go back and look at it and go, yeah, I can see that. So it actually helps me. And it makes them go back and look at the material to prove me wrong. It's awesome. So think of it as a, you know, it's just one more time you've got them going in and digging into that information. So, and maybe they go back and prove themselves wrong.
How often has that happened?
For me, rarely. A couple times a semester, maybe. And
Although it's valuable for them too. It's a metacognitive process.
It is.
Natural is that to interrogate the questions. Not because of not from your side, from
Yeah.
your perspective. Because most of the time you just do it, okay, what's the next thing? It gives feedback. It takes you back.
they really have to dig in and talk. And so I'm going to talk about, when I talk about peer evaluation, we'll talk about, you know, the motivation to be prepared and everyone be prepared and everyone participate.
When there is a problem with a question, do you throw it out? Or
I will the next time, but only the group that appeals it gets the points.
Okay.
You don't just go back and throw it out for everybody else. If everybody else was fine with it, that's fine. But that group, if they appeal it and you read and say, okay, you've made a valid point, you go back and award them the points.
Okay.
And on their individual test, if they missed it on their individual test and on their group test, but there's the only ones. Okay. So the next important piece is really the heart and the meat of what we do, and it's the application exercises. Once again, I'm not going to delve real deeply into this because in November we are going to spend an entire hour talking about designing and using application exercises. But there's something called the 4S principle about them. It has to be a significant problem. These are the things that the teams are going to work together on. They all have to be working on the same problem. They have to make a specific choice. I mean, you really got to get them to narrow down, and then you have them simultaneously report their answer or their conclusion. Very important. Okay. One of the first application exercises I have them do, so I'm jumping back to the beginning to orientation, I have them go through a grade weighting exercise. I allow students to set grade weights for the class within some parameters. I mean, I have some things that I say, you know, you can weight it between this and this, but they get to go in and determine, okay, what's the individual portion going to count, what's the team portion performance going to count, and how much is the peer evaluation going to count. And you may have some subcategories, you know, within of those. So they've got to decide overall what the 3 pieces are going to count, and then maybe major portions within. So, for example, the individual performance, typically they only have 2 things in there. I have their IRAT and I have homework. So they get to weight that, and I may tell them it's got to be that the IRAT's got to be at least 10%. But once again, a lot of what I'm telling you, there's a lot of material about this, and a lot of people have shared different ways they've approached this. But that's fun. So they get to actually have they get to decide as a team. They send one person to the middle and they negotiate, and you have to come to a consensus as a class at the beginning of the semester. So they have decided up front, how much each thing's going to count. It's been fascinating. It's happened. I've had some that were so afraid to let go of that individual grade, they can't trust their group. They learned about halfway through that they had made a mistake because the group always does better than the individual. Statistically, it's very, very, very rare that you're going to have an individual that's consistently outscoring what the team's doing.
So each group gets to decide?
Each group decides amongst themselves what they would like it to be. Then one member of each team comes together, and those 5 or 6, the 3 people that you sent to the middle would have to negotiate. And if they might come back to you and go, well, they want individual to be 15%. Are y'all okay with that? Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. So that's a fun thing. So it is, they're making a specific choice, but it's the first time as a team they kind of work together. And they decide. So they have some power over, hey.
And the entire class has the same rubric for that.
Yes. So that's the way you set up your Canvas grade book and how you weight all the grading at the end. Depending on your discipline, you're going to have different types of problems, right? I use case studies a lot. If you're math, obviously, you're probably going to be working math problems. If you're in the medical field, you're going to have very specific things that you want to do. You might have diagnosis where they're giving, information and they have to come up with a diagnosis, whatever. And I will say this right now, there's tons of material out there for the medical field. This has been wholly embraced by nursing and medicine and other medical fields. So y'all are fortunate. I am not as fortunate. I have to create a lot of my stuff. So that's one of the areas I'm really still working on a lot myself to hone my application exercise, just quite frankly. I've had some that have worked great, and I have some that went, not so good. But once again, let's just go back to what we're trying to do. We're trying to design something that they do in class that's at this level. All right, so they're spending their time in class doing this, and you're there at that point to move about the room, answer any questions, listen to what they're doing, see if they're on the right path. The nice thing about too is that when they make that specific choice and then they simultaneously report, you don't want to have the first group gets up and say, well, we thought blah, 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 blah. And then the next group goes, oh, we said the same thing, right? So you want them to simultaneously tell you. And there are different ways of doing that. So I'm going to show you a little picture here in a moment. But one of the things with the application exercise is that you do need them to prepare before class. So this is where, once again, I require an individual homework assignment so that I know the individuals have done at least a minimal amount of preparation before they walk into the classroom so they can be a productive team member. They can't phone it in. They can't have not read the material because they're going to have to, for me, it's a case analysis sometimes. I have a guided questions and they come in with a hard copy where they have done a synopsis of the case and they've answered a couple of questions. Now, I'm going to build on that for my application exercise. But you introduce what you're going to do. They spend their time talking amongst themselves and coming up to their answer. Then we simultaneously report, and then that facilitates a cross-team discussion of the material. Right? Then you close. You may have some artifacts. They may create something, but they're going to create it right then. They may not create something. Like I said, we're going to really delve into this in November and talk about different ways of doing this, and we'll pull some materials in. But I will show you, so here's some classrooms. Okay? You see this classroom, and this is this very large classroom. They're holding up cards that say A, B, C, D, or E on them. Right. No. I think it's better you have to show visibly cards because this is what I saw, and this is something I'm moving towards. So this is what I want to do. This is one way of approaching this is having very high-level multiple choice questions. I mean, that they really have to sit and discuss and negotiate and come up with the answer. And then they simultaneously, every team, somebody holds up their letter. Then you can look around very quickly and go, okay, someone stand up and tell me why you chose B when everyone else has chosen A. You know, so then they can get up and talk about, and then we start to discuss the different answers. You can even add points to that. So say there is a right answer, and everybody can get the right answer. And then you can see the ones that didn't get the right answer, you can give them opportunity to get up and discuss their rationale for that. And they may or may not be able to convince you that they're right. You know, maybe there was a possibility of a second right answer. It all depends on the kind of exercises you're using. I talked to a friend of mine, Chris Eidson, who's in occupational therapy. UAB has embraced this as a campus. So I was in the School of Health Professions at UAB for 10 years. And so some of those folks were at this last conference with me. And he said he kind of fought doing the multiple choice questions. He said, but once he gave into it, he said it really is great because it does hone them down to that specific choice. This is where developing the materials takes some time. And so if you can find materials that are out there, or if you can work together with colleagues and vet each other's materials, that's very helpful. But think about those really, really tough test questions you've had in the past that people struggled with. You know, you can even look back at the sort of things that you would have tested them on in a traditional setting. Because now you're testing them on something that's just very high level concept. And they've got to keep digging that material and learn the rest. Another thing you can do is have a gallery walk. So this is my classroom. It's the first time I ever taught this, I think. Yeah, I think this was my quality management class. I think I had to do like a plan, do, study, act diagram or something here. So we had markers around the great room because we've got, you know, glass boards around the room. They got up and they would, after they talked, they got up and they did their little piece and then they walked. We did a gallery walk and we discussed it that way. I've done this in a room that was a traditional classroom where I used those big Post-it notes, you know, that you can pull. So they would write on those and slap it on the wall. We would do a gallery walk. So lots of different ways to do this, but they do need to be able to do it simultaneously. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a team leader, and that's the one that's holding up the matter?
That's up to you. That's one of those things where you may have someone that gravitates to that, or you may, another technique is each and every time they come in here, they have to change jobs. Somebody now, you're now the team scribe and you're going to be the team leader. And I've also heard that there have been some classes where they've seen the person got up to speak, to defend their answer, and the entire team stood up with them just to support them.
I was going to say that reticent student's going to have a hard time standing up and a
But they're different techniques. You know, there's no hard and fast way of doing that, of who's going to be the person that holds up the card or does the speaking. And if you want them to be developing those skills, then you can require them to change roles and not, so the person who's quiet isn't always taking notes. All right. So finally, peer evaluation. Very important component of this. It's called team maintenance. So we have individual performance, team performance, and team maintenance. It counts. This is how they evaluate their compadres on their preparation and their contribution for the entire semester. So what I have learned by trial by error is to give them two opportunities. So I do a formative evaluation about midterm, and then I do a summative at the end. And the formative, I found this great tool where I had a rubric where they were supposed to say you would rate your two members on, you know, these certain things that I had on there, and then you would give one positive, one, hey, this is one of your strengths. It really has helped the group, and here's an area where you could, improve, or if you change something, it would help the group. I also give them instruction on how to word that. So when I take that and grade it, I look at how you scored your fellow member, but then I grade you on the quality of the feedback you gave them. So think about how many of our nurses become nurse managers, right? They're going to supervise. There's hardly anybody that's not going to supervise someone down the road. So here's another opportunity to teach them a skill, start beginning, how do we give good peer feedback, or how do we give good, even a subordinate feedback? So that was helpful. So that also gives people time to recover if they are really if they're not ever showing up on time, or they're not holding to the charter, and they're not obviously not preparing. They find out midterm, hey, we notice you're not preparing. It would really be helpful if you would read the material before you come to class. But on the other hand, we also have, hey, we appreciate the leadership. I mean, you are a natural born leader, but sometimes we don't feel like you listen to us, or you dismiss our ideas offhand and always go with your idea. So it goes both ways. It's not just the slackers or the free riders that are getting that feedback. It's also that dominant personality, the smartest person in the room, that needs to find out that there are some other smart people sitting around them too, and they would like to be heard. I watched it, take that to heart, but if it's given to them in a way that's very constructive, and then they have time to recover. At the end of the semester, I just do a rating. I don't allow teams to give the same number of points to each team member. So there are different ways of doing that too. I've read 4 or 5 different, people's account of how they handle that. So there are a lot of ways to handle that, so that you can't just say, everybody gets a 10. Everybody's not a 10, y'all. But I had something happen interesting because I did that formative and summative. This semester, I had a team that obviously they felt very good about all their team members, and they collaborated with one another to determine how to distribute the points so that in the end they all got the same number of points. But I had one of the team members email me and say, I don't feel like that we need to do that because I don't feel that way about all my team members, and so she didn't do it. She didn't give the numbers she was supposed to give. She gave what she thought she should give. It was real interesting though, but I thought, good for them. I mean, they really felt like they had all equally contributed, so they were trying to figure out, I thought, well, that's teamwork. That's teamwork. Wasn't going to say, you can't do that. That's something they decided outside the classroom. But once again, they had to come to a consensus on it, and they had one person who said, I'm not going to do that. Because I think she was supposed to give a really high score to somebody that she really felt like deserved a high score. So it was interesting to watch that happen.
But was not able to express that in the group.
No, didn't express it with the group, or maybe after the fact, or she may have expressed it with the group and then said, can't do that.
Interesting.
It was. That's the first time that's happened, because it became very clear to me that as I watched the numbers come in, I was like, this is interesting. Something's going on here.
There's some schemes where you're not allowed to give everyone the same amount of points.
Well, that's what mine is.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah. I do.
But they had agreed on, I'm sorry,
They had agreed going, okay, 9, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11. Because I have everybody, at least one person has to get below a 10, and at least one person has to get above a 10. Usually they're all pretty close, but one time I had I was obvious there were a couple people in that group and said, these people they were terrible. So that's why the formative has really helped that, because when I was just using summative, and then when I did the summative, I'd had them do a big group project right at the end, and it's like all they were thinking about was that project. So I had to keep going back you were rating on an entire body of work here. It's not just on the last little project that you worked on together. So help them to remember that maybe on that very last assignment, they weren't at their best, but they've been good all semester. They've been consistently good. Just think about, will it work for you? If you like just talking, you're going to be challenged. But what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to create professionals. We want them to think, and they are going to challenge us. Sometimes it is challenging. It's a different way of design. It's a lot of work too, I'll be honest with you, but it's a different type of work. A lecture course is a lot of work when you prep it. So this is a lot of prep time too. It's just a different kind of prep. And building those application exercises and using something called backwards design. I haven't even talked about that today, but backwards design is very much a part of this. What do I want them to be able to do at the end of this module? How can they demonstrate that they know how to do it? Now, what do they need to read and understand in order to get to that point? So, always looking at those learning objectives differently than you write your learning objectives, you slap them on the front of the syllabus, and then you really don't look back at them. This is very learning objective oriented. And thinking about beyond, understand, recall, remember. So some resources for you, the next two, building teams and getting buy-in. I'm going to show you demonstrate some techniques there. And then we're going to work on developing application exercises. So if you want to come, if you want to recruit somebody from your discipline area that you want to get involved in developing the materials with you, would probably be a good idea. The Team-Based Learning Collaborative website, this is where I learned everything. I call it, I'm a big OTJ kind of person. But I bought this book and I read it. And that is not the best organized website I've ever met in my life. They're improving it. But if you want to become a member, the Big Yo Center has membership, and I think for an institutional member, there's so many folks. I have an individual membership myself now, so there's a lot of stuff behind the firewall that you want to be able to get to. There is a repository for materials, especially I think the medical community kind of has their own thing going, and they do peer review and vet the materials that are submitted to them. It's a very, very generous community. People are sharing their materials left and right. That's kind of become a hallmark of this group. There's another book by Jim Sibley. He's another, so I'd say Jim Sibley and Larry Michelson are kind of the two big names in this. This book is probably some of the same material, but this is more of a how-to manual. I got the second time, but I highly recommend those. Live in that website, and I'm always going back and looking through it. There's all kinds of materials out there about how you do it, and then there's materials about just tips and tricks and techniques and things I've done in the classroom, and then there's a listserv, and that listserv, there'll be a lot of chatter at certain times, like beginning of the semester. People will pose questions and I'll tell you what, Jim Sibley and Larry Michelson get on there and answer questions on that listserv, along with lots of other people that are, been doing this for years and years. But I'm very impressed. They love this technique, and they feel so invested in it that they, in their dotage, and I don't know if Larry's emeritus now, he's in there, he's engaging, he's trying to help, new faculty love TBL. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious about your, particularly if you've done a course the traditional way and then this way, and can you compare your grade outcomes?
I have slightly higher grade outcomes in TBL.
Do you still have students who are unsatisfactory?
I never have students who are unsatisfactory. I have very good students.
So you don't ever have a student who...
I have, in the 5 years I've been here, I've got probably that many that I thought were really unsatisfactory students.
But none of them were...
No.
C's on course.
No, I haven't had a C in a TBL course yet.
Okay.
I haven't had a C. These are upper level courses. They should be at this point pretty highly engaged. But that's my story. That's just me. It all depends too on how they weight their grades. If they weight their individual score up really high, they do not do well sometimes on the individual RATs, or you'll have a lot of variance. I had someone tell me, I think that her perspective, this was the nurse from Australia, that she felt like that if, for the RAT, for example, she said she felt like if, students were getting 80% of the questions, that you probably had it aimed about right on an individual basis. That you probably had those questions kind of written at the right level for that readiness assurance process. Like I said, I'm still scratching and digging and learning things, and it was such a great experience this past year to go to the TBL conference and to meet other people, and just, because there are very few of us right now on this campus, but more and more people are getting interested in it, but being able to talk with others and ask them some of these same questions, because I've got a lot of things I'm struggling with, and am I being, but I think most of them will tell you that the grades tend to go up, but that's a good thing, right? That means that they're giving you good outcomes. You want their outcomes to go up, right? Yes.
About how many reads you are doing during semester?
5. I do 5 modules.
One of the applications you give the student is to
Graded.
do grading.
Yes.
Right?
I do at least one per module that's a graded application. Some of them are not graded.
And I mean, for them to decide which grading systems they will follow, you give them some limits.
I do.
So do you have those limits? I mean, just to guide as a guidelines for us
Yeah. I got it out of here.
this year. Okay.
I got it out of here, and I've read Jim Sibley's, what he does, so I can't right off the top of my head. I'm not teaching that class this semester, so I can't remember, but I don't let anything be less than 10% at those 3 major pieces. But I just, if you go on the website, if you look in this, people have shared how they do it, and people do it different ways. And some people don't do TBL every class. The nursing program that I talked about, they tend to do it like once every 3 weeks, that they do a full-on, I have a 3-hour class, and they do a TBL class, and they may not do it in the other weeks. So that might be something you would want to explore and reaching out and looking to the nursing community. So people have done, but it is very much, a methodology to it in terms of strategically formed teams, the readiness assurance process, the application exercise, and the peer evaluation. So I guess our time is up.
Let's thank Dr. Irwin, and we'll be looking forward to the conference.